Mike, I saw you were disappointed in my no verbal message, although I think it's a pretty cool uh, video from this guy that runs a machine shop of sorts, machine and welding. You asked about my prediction of how I think things are going to unravel. Well, I, I don't think it's going to be like everything falls down at one time. I think it's going to be things start breaking. Um, the thing I think is the most serious is the national debt. So I'll say that kind of my thoughts on that. The interest rate now is up to like 5%, which is a big deal because it wasn't very long ago that it was 4%. And it's been down, I think, 2% in the last 5 years. So that's a lot more money that we're having to pay to borrow money as a country. I think that's going to keep going up. And it's kind of somewhat arbitrary, but 5% serious, 6% like critical, 7% catastrophic. And I actually think that will happen fairly quickly, and they'll start, you know, taking off and running away. Um, and they may cover some of that by just printing more money, but it's just a kind of delaying tactic. It's still delaying tactic, just results in inflation instead of borrowing costs. Either way, it's not good. But that guy the video that I put on there is a guy that runs a small shop, and he's talking about how his power cost and labor cost and uh, the amount of stuff he's selling's gone down. And I think he's kind of connected with a lot of farmers and uh, other business people because he makes stuff in a shop for people. And I think it's a piece that's already unraveling, which is the labor market. Um, and then I think the interest the interest rates on the 30-year Treasury, I think, kind of a little bit arbitrary what you pick, but that's kind of you know long term what they think of the U.S. And I think that will happen in, I don't know, by the first quarter of 2027. I mean, I don't think it's way out there in the future. I think it's going to get serious fairly quickly. I also think gas prices and stuff are not through with going up. Uh, the whole world's been kind of pumping down the reserves and buffering this thing way out. So people were pretty well prepared for it. Doesn't mean that it's still not, you know, a big disaster. It's just quite paid the price for it yet. Well, that's my prediction machine. I'll think about other predictions. I probably should write those down so that you have some kind of record of Nostradamus here. Anyway, talk to you later, son. Bye.
Okay, good to hear from you, Dad. I appreciate the outline of what the video is interesting to you for, um, what it what it means to you. So I will check it out soon. I'm heading into work, and yeah, it just dawns on me while you're talking and just thinking back on all of our conversations, how like I think because of language and because of your training, like as an engineer and your skill sets, that uh, that the abstract is more concrete to you than I think the concrete itself is. And it's not a critique. This is just a noticing because it's like um, I'm, on the daily solving what are considered really in, infinitesimally small problems, and I'm like working, uh, making sure the paper towel is stocked, uh, fixing the handle on the torch, um, talking with the neighbor about a tree that he wants to cut down that's really on our property. Um, you know, just figuring out how to coordinate weed whackers because more people need them than we have, and so how do I allocate that resource, efficiently? Um, how do I keep the fountain from you know evaporating so fast, or how do I remember to fill it uh, often enough? And the I mean, you could get snagged by thinking about any of these particular issues. That's not the point of what I'm saying at all. Um, I'm just noticing that when you're like predicting things, like it was very little effect on what I was thinking as far as how my experience of life will change over the next 5 years, and not based on those particular data points, but just based on my spectrum of data points, like what it's like to be alive each day through the day, you know, grocery shopping, cooking food, um, driving to and from work, picking up things at the store on the way in and the way out, meeting friends, social occasions, just like what it's like to be alive, And I think throughout our conversations, you have, gone to this. I mean, not always, because when you talk about the past and talking about your dog running away and all that, that's the life that I have and I'm familiar with. That's why I like those stories. Um, I mean, I don't know if that's why, but that's a reason I can imagine that's why. But anyway, it's just an observation. I was just thinking about that. I guess I'll let it go for now because I'm at work and I need to get out of the car. But yeah, thanks for checking in. I hope you have a great day. Yeah, if you want to write down your predictions, that would be cool. I'm going to match your time with mine. Love you.
Mike, to relate how the interest rate on the 30-year treasury will affect you, it comes back to affordability. All those activities you mentioned, pardon me, driving to the work, going over to friends, picking up groceries, all those are going to be affected with cost. And no single one of them breaks the bank, but all added up together means your life becomes more difficult. And you're kind of in the, you know, I would guess lower middle class, maybe middle class. Um, and so the pain is distributed. Uh, the most people at the bottom get most of the pain, and people in the middle get some of the pain, and the people at the top get none of the pain. Elon gets none of the pain. With affordability, it's just not a relatable issue, and his earnings will multiply because the dollar changes, and he holds assets that have a kind of a maybe overestimated value, but a value that has some merit. And so his holdings, his portfolio adjust to changes in affordability. People in the bottom have nothing to adjust with, and the only thing they have most times is their salary, and that is controlled by the guys at the top, so it does not adjust as much. In fact, it probably distributes more of the money to the guys at the top. So that's, that's how the Treasury interest rates on all the different bonds affects you. Right now, they're covering part of that, kind of like the oil crisis. They have a lot of reserves, around the world, tanks full of oil that we've drawn down, just like we've drawn down Patriot missiles. But we're also drawing down our gold reserves. That's a hedge against you can't sell your bonds, sell some of your gold and get money. And the U.S. had the largest reserves of gold. I don't know if we still do. I think we still do. Um, and we're selling down while the rest of the world is moving up. It's postponing the day of reckoning. And I guess I didn't put that into my, prediction machine in my head. I'd say first quarter, the end of the first quarter is kind of the when you start seeing interest rates get out of control. That could be postponed maybe through most of 2027 by just selling more of our gold reserves, essentially selling our money, selling an asset, um, taking away from our kids' future. I guess my kids' futures. I think it's all very interesting. Here's another consequence, which was in one of those videos I sent you, and the algorithms on YouTube helped me out here. I watched an algorithm on the gender warfare in Korea, and you say, well, why the hell does that matter? Well, it's kind of like a canary in the coal mine. They've got tougher conditions and less resiliency, less robustness to deal with the world kind of falling apart. And people kind of turn on themselves in some strange, unimaginable way. But in Korea, the men's side of the story is they have to go to um, military service or country service for 2 years, and they get behind. Um, they're falling out of college just like in the U.S. Um, the way the dating apps work, all the women are competing over the top 10% of men, and the 90% essentially get no women, no sex. Women, on the other hand, say, the guys aren't measuring up, they don't have any uh, assets, which there it's, buying a home and having a home to put your family in. So the net effect of, it's the system is deteriorating, and it's putting the men and the women in a worse position. Uh, so they each kind of are blaming the other side. And so they're not having sex, they're not having kids. Fertility rates, 0.7 or something, which means um, in 3 generations they're down to 5% of the population or something, like some nonsense. I mean, it's surprisingly fast. Generation is 30 years, so in 90 years you don't have a South Korea. I watched another video on the 6 plans they've put together for um, trying to stop that in South Korea because they realize that it's a problem. Um, the kids are having to take care of their parents who are getting older, and there's not many people working, a retirement trap. That's also coming in America, a little bit slower. So you can watch South Korea, see what's happening there, what's happening in China, and it's a kind of a precursor of what's happening here. Saved only by immigrants, but we're doing our best to get rid of that thing that, was saving our ass. Meanwhile, over here in the US, we're subject to the same globalization falling apart, life getting harder, resources depleting. Um, Gender hostility growing. Um, I go to the UUFN, United Unitarian Universalists, who's kind of a religion for anybody that kind of wants to make the world a better place. But there's a kind of open hostility toward Republicans. Um, a lot of them. Some of them are progressives. Um, None of them are really big on white males. There's a gender hostility. I feel it. I'm probably uh, I'm I would bet I'm probably I would say I've got to be in the top 3 white males that are probably most notable um, and most outspoken. You'd be surprised I'm outspoken, but I'm much more docile than I used to be. I kind of answer questions when asked, and deflect most of the white male comments. But it's definitely there. There's a white male hostility. That's coming to your world too, thanks to what's unraveling. So a lot of the things that affect your life, you can deal with them and overcome them, and they don't apply to you, but they apply to someone to the street down from you, which indirectly applies to you, since we're all interconnected. So we're entering a time where we want to blame someone, but it kind of is not, in the bigger scheme of things, not anybody's fault. There are people that are doing really stupid things to accelerate the problem. Trump and his tariffs, Trump and his Iran war, Trump, not helping Ukraine. I mean, a lot of those things kind of incrementally, they significantly speed up the problem, but they're actually going exactly counter to the problem. I mean, we should be increasing our supply chains because that's what all wealth is built on top of. It's basic stuff. I mean, like you're talking about a relay in your wife's car. Well, where the hell does that came from? It came from it's probably mostly metal, maybe some plastic on it. I haven't looked at a relay recently, but and it's probably not just a mild steel. It's probably some kind of alloy. So there's some a touch of chrome or manganese and maybe a manganese steel or something. But anyway, it's got alloying agents. Haven't looked into relays, but those all came out of the ground. Um, and since China controls 90% of the supply chains for everything, um, probably came from China. Um, Shipped over here in a boat, put in a warehouse, and distributed to you. Well, if we were getting along with China, that's a swell system. And I actually think it's the only way, if we, over the next 5 to 10 years, if we want to, you know, buffer out the effect of declining resources and kind of, you know, take a rope down the cliff instead of, free falling into the ground. Um, China, Asia manufacturers, maybe some in um, Africa, Canada, Australia, Peru, the usual potential friend list that we're trying hard to get rid of. Um, that could buffer the fall and slow this, calamitous fall that we're all going to experience. I would say at the end of the 5 year period, life is going to be significantly more difficult than it is right now. And I don't see our political system coming along and uh, fixing it, but it could get bad enough fast enough that we kind of shock some, you know, political actors in. Like, I don't think I would have ever said this in my 80 years of existence on this planet, but I think I'm seriously considering calling myself a democratic socialist. Wow, is that radical? It's not so radical facing the problems we are. Sometimes it takes a big hammer to deal with a big nail, or it takes a big pair of, takes a powerful, I can't get a good analogy here, but we're dealing with the Elon Musk of the world. And I don't think a gentle, I don't think our publicans are certainly not going to do anything to help us um, stop that big sucking sound of all the money going to the top. I don't think the Democratic Party can get their act together enough to help that. They tend to look at just too much on one side of the equation, which is um, you've got to tax the rich more. That kind of is they got to pay their fair share, and it's got to be based on their assets. And people say, well, you tax them and they don't have any way to pay it. Well, they pay it the same way they pay themselves. They go to a bank and they borrow money against their assets. Their assets keep going up. So they can't almost borrow fast enough for the percentage that they've owe. You know, if they borrow 1% of their assets, they have more money than they know what to do with. So if they have to borrow 1.1% of their assets to pay the tax, who the hell cares? It's not a problem. It's not a problem for them, and it's certainly an help for us. But I don't see the Democrats going beyond that. They might go that far to wealth tax, but it's a much more systemic problem. I mean, to be poor in this country, their wages have to go up. Minimum wage, kind of a crude tool, but it's the one we've got at the moment. You also have to look at child care expenses, medical expenses, the health system, everybody on Medicare, kind of like uh, Bernie wanted. So I'm looking at the Democratic Socialists. Now, I think they want to go too far too quick, which will stop them from going anywhere uh, at all because they won't get elected. Which is, the idea of being, you know, incremental and picking your battles and stuff. Maybe they're doing that. Maybe I don't give them credit. But I think they scare too many people. Well, I'm not scared of them because I'm more scared of the people at the top. I can see what they're doing. Apparently, America can't see it, but they're sucking us dry. They're spending all our wealth on stuff that just like to roll out in money on AI that and data centers. That borders on being so stupid. I don't even know how to address it. Um, you get those things working at a scale that doesn't bankrupt us if they go wrong. This is analogous to it's been many companies over the year that have skipped making pilot plants because you go, wow, we got to build a pilot plant, run it for 3 years. That's going to cost like it's a significant sum of money, and it's a commitment, now for money that arrives 10 years from now if you're lucky. So people are really hesitant. I've got a potential investor in Oman that's looked at my magnesium pilot plant. And he looks at that and he goes, wow, crap, I just put it in the U.S. Treasury and, get my 5%. And it's going to be hard for you to beat that 10 years out, 15 years out when your money starts coming back in. And that's it. It's if it starts coming back in, if your process works, if we can find investors for the bigger one, if come. So that's, you remember when I kind of said the people, the copper people, their business was copper. So they did copper and they were looking for the best investment they could find in copper. You might branch out to, oh, we've found some nickel here. Let's make, that's kind of second cousin to copper. We'll make a nickel mine and we'll, make some nickel metal and sell that to the steel producers to make, part of stainless steel. But it was, you were in that business and you look for the best return. Now, the downside of that is you don't make the big bucks. The upside of that is you keep employment and jobs and you have access to copper. You don't depend on someone else. And it turns out to be having access to copper is pretty damn important. So that guy, the video that I picked of that guy that's in a shop, he works in Minnesota, and he makes snow plows and other metal things that he can weld together from steel. He's getting hit by shipping costs, insurance costs, electricity costs, labor costs. And it's all on a per unit basis, very expensive for him. For a company making 10,000 plows like they do in China, it's not so much. It's all those, those costs are spread out over more units. And we're now in a position that we actually cannot compete against China. It's not a matter of being smarter or wiser. There's exceptions to what I'm saying. But as a general rule, we no longer can compete against the machine that is China. Now, China has its own set of stupid problems. They don't distribute their money to their workers. So their workers have no money to buy their products. So therefore, China has to ship all the products out of the country and sell them and flood our markets. And so they're using, it's kind of like capitalism is supposed to drive down the cost of everything, but it also drives down the cost of labor. You need a shortage of something to drive the price up. There's always been an excess of labor, and so China is like the epitome of what happens capitalism. And yet they're a socialist economy. That's the socialist communist are thought authoritarian, but they're still like, how stupid is it that they had like 1,000 uh, electric car companies and now they're down to 100? That is just a system that does that is so wasteful. Um, and that's the kind of thing that's driving their debt. And the only thing they can do to survive that is send all those cars all over the world and crash everybody else's car markets. Um, it's a serious problem, one that our politicians are completely inept. And we also have this image of America as the greatest and we're superior and all that. But we are good and we have been good for a long time. But you can't overcome those kind of disadvantages without recognizing it's true. We can no longer compete with China, period, in almost every area. Even chips that we're ahead of right now, but that's a vanishing, give it a couple of years and we're behind. We might already be behind. The AI systems are, that they're turning out with cheaper chips cost, 10% of what our AI systems cost to run. And they have twice as much electricity to run it on at half the cost. So you can't compete against that. I've done return on investment analysis for decades, and I'm pretty damn good at it. Um, and I understand how all of it fits together. We cannot compete against China. It's just it's not doable. I mean, you can't do it. So now you have to accept the fact that in so many areas we cannot compete. Now you need a plan that deals with that. Now, I think you start by subsidizing. I know that's painful, but that's also socialistic, but I think that's where we're at. In the history of the world, uh, if we want to survive, that's where we've got to go. I don't think there's any way out. Um, I think we have to start. You can't start subsidizing everybody because that's just another way of printing more money and everybody goes broke. But you start with the basics, with the commodities, the things that are inputs to everything else, the things that we've walked away from that NIMBYs have told us is too dirty for us. Well, if we want to survive, we've got to um, we've got to resurrect that. Everybody's got to be able to get their hands on steel, and copper, and lead, zinc, magnesium, chrome. Now, most people don't know what you need all those for, but you need all those to build a whole bunch of stuff around you. And we're in pretty good shape of building most of the stuff that we have comes from three places. Either, you know, metals, minerals, they're kissing cousins, um, farming, or oil. There may be stuff that comes from other places, but even when you say, oh, like renewables, the sun, no, the glass panel you got, where the hell do you think that came from? The silver connectors and the copper wiring and the metal frame. It all came out of the damn ground, came out of the mines. I know I'm getting on one of my rants, but it's important to understand that our whole society is built on foundation materials. The one I'm most familiar with is the minerals and metals. But there's the food and there's the oil that provides a lot of the basic things that we use in our life. Um, and we're still good on oil, and we used to be pretty good in food. I'm not sure that Trump hasn't screwed that up too. Uh, we won't. That's a whole nother podcast. So, how will the treasury notes affect you? All that stuff and our ability to subsidize it, support it, and renew it and bring it back, our connection with China, is all held together because so far we've got the dollar that's able to pull things uphill. Take away that dollar and our ability to pull the Cepheus. What is the hell's that guy, that Greek guy that keeps pushing the rock up the hill and it rolls down every day? Um, anyway, we can't do these Herculean, I'll use a word I know, um, task without the world's currency. And we need people to loan us money by buying our treasury bonds. When they don't do that, we will not be able to pull the oil tankers overseas, and all the stuff that you use on your job are going to get harder and harder to get up the hill. And as the resources get depleted, it gets harder for the whole world to pull up. China's in the best place to pull stuff up the hill. And we're probably in the least. Okay, another way to look at it is, we're 5% of the world's population. We've been using 20% of the raw materials, energy, everything else. That number is going down. It's going down from 20% to 5%. And you're going to feel that in every aspect of your work. And the canary in the coal mine is the interest rate on the treasury bills. So I hope I brought that back to your world. Yeah, I do think on a global scale, and kind of my training of like how do you build a metallurgical plant, you've got to know where the hell everything comes from and how the whole system works if you want to make it figure it out. And we don't have many of me and people that understand this anymore. And I see a lot of big metal companies making a lot of stupid mistakes, and they're nested in a system that's got stupid with time. In your world, you see it, we don't have a plumber or electrician or welder to help get stuff done. Well, there's skilled people to keep the big system running too, and they're getting in short supply. I want to say this is the Ancient Texas sign off, but this is also Dad. I think this is a good podcast. I'm going to put it out there. Not many people listening, but I don't know how to fix that. I'm not so good at marketing. Talk to you later, son. Love you. Bye.